Now we're going to talk about another method of masking images inside Photoshop, and that is through use of a clipping mask. Now, clipping masks have been around for some time. They have numerous uses, and it's basically, if you think about the way a layer mask works, it applies that extra icon on the same layer. It is masking what is on the same layer of your image. So the layer mask is attached to whatever layer you're working on. In the case of a clipping mask, it requires at minimum 2 layers. It uses one layer to hide or reveal the parts of another. So to just give you an idea, here's how it works. I've got a graphic here. It's a shape layer. I actually got it from the custom shape menu here inside Photoshop. If I just went to custom shape tool, went up here into the shape menu, and there's this large menu of shapes, and you can see that trophy graphic is right there. And I have a texture, just kind of a football texture on the top of it, and I want to mask that texture inside of this shape. Now, I certainly could generate a selection and make a layer mask for this shape, but I want to be able to edit the layer and do other things to it as well. So I want to be able to use a clipping mask. Now, there are a number of different ways to apply a clipping mask. The first thing you need to make sure of is that the image that's going to be the mask, in a sense, is the base layer. It's going to be beneath, at the bottom of the layer stack here. Whatever is going to be masked, the image that you're going to mask inside of the shape, needs to be above that layer. To invoke a clipping mask, you can do it one of 3 ways. You can go under the, or you have several ways actually, but I'm just going to go show you. You can go into the layer pop-out menu here and go down here and choose Create Clipping Mask. And you can also use the keyboard shortcut, which is Option-Command-G, which would be Alt-Control-G on Windows. Now the other method is holding down the Option key, or Alt key if you're on Windows again, and positioning your cursor between the 2 layers. You'll notice the cursor changes into that little square with a bent arrow. And you just click once, and you'll notice the appearance of the layer changes, indicating that it is part of a clipping group. Now notice what happened in the actual image. The texture is now only visible inside of the shape of that trophy, and that's because it's clipped into that layer. They are still separate layers. If I go and select this layer and move this object around, you'll notice that the texture moves, but the shape does not. I can go in here and move the shape around if I select on that layer. So I can still edit these 2 layers as if they were separate layers, because quite literally they are separate layers. It's just that I'm only able to see this layer through the pixels of this layer below. Now to deactivate a clipping mask is just as simple. Again, hold down the Option key on Mac, Alt on Windows, click in between the layers, and it releases the clipping mask. Again, here's that keyboard shortcut, Option-Command-G, invokes the clipping mask, and you can clip it right inside there. This has numerous uses. One of the most common uses I use clipping masks is in the case of text. Now let's say you have an image, and let's actually use this image here that I created earlier with the blend modes, applying the texture to this vintage film graphic. And I want to clip this image inside of the letters of this text. This is a very common design thing. You've probably seen this numerous times. So I'm actually going to close in the tracking in the text a little bit here. And let's go ahead and bring this image over and make sure that it is above the layer of the text. Now, the reason I like to use clipping masks in the case of text like this is that I have editable text here. If I wanted to mask this text, or the image with the text, I would have to make a selection, and then go over here and make a layer mask out of that, and now the image is clipped inside of there. And I could unlock the layer mask for sure, and go in here and move the image around. I can move the mask around too. The problem is, what if I want to change what the text is saying? Well, that's no good, because now it's a layer mask. It's no longer editable text. So let's throw away this layer mask, turn back on that text layer, and go ahead and create a clipping group. I'm going to hold down my Option key once again, Alt on Windows, click in between the layers. Voila. There's my image inside of that text. Now the beauty is I can move this around as if it were its own layer, which it is. And I can also move the text around. I can also double click on the layer and change the text right there on the fly. And it maintains that clipping. And now we can see that image inside of there. You'll notice also I've got a few layer styles applied to this text here. I've got a stroke and a drop shadow. All of those are remaining visible, because this is the base layer. It's only going to show this image through the native pixels of the layer, which in this case is just the text. Any layer styles will be 100% visible. So you can see the advantage here of using clipping masks with regard to text, being able to have the freedom of changing the text wherever you want, but still being able to maintain that effect without having to turn it into a layer mask or something like that. And this is another huge advantage of using clipping masks. One other example was actually a graphic I created not too long ago. It was part of a wall design I did at home. And I wanted to create these series of panels of images. And thinking about building it, I was thinking, I could use layer masks, but the problem is I'm going to be creating layer masks and editing masks all the time. And I'm going to be repositioning things as I go. So I discovered that clipping masks are going to be a better deal for me. And this really illustrates how you can use multiple images in a clipping mask. Those first two examples, we were clipping just one image or one layer with another layer. So let's say I've got this base graphic of these 9 panels here, and I've got a texture that I'm going to start with as a base. So I'm going to hold down the Option key, clip that inside of those shapes. I've got this image here of the projector, I've got this image of these slides, and I've got another texture at the very top here that I want to blend in. So again, you can add multiple layers to a single clipping group. So I'm going to, again, click on the option here, and you can apply it again the same way. You can use the keyboard shortcut, and notice that I'm just adding each new layer to this clipping group. Ultimately, masks out each one based on the base layer. All the way down here at the bottom, those original 9 panels are the base layer. Each one of these images above is being clipped inside of those shapes because they're all in the same clipping group. And no matter which way you order them, they're going to remain in that clipping group until you undo it by option clicking between the layers. But now I'm able to manipulate and change and edit these layers, each one individually, and not have to worry about the masking or reapplying any layer masks. And in fact, I can apply a different kind of layer mask if I wanted a different fade rather than masking it in here. So you can see how you can combine clipping masks with layer mask to ultimately get an effect here. I can go over here and just do like a fade over here on this corner and bringing out some more of this texture at the top here. So when you're mastering not just layer masks, but clipping masks, you can combine them and ultimately blend images on top of images and get a much more complex blending effect. So you have that much more freedom. Similar to the case of blend modes. You have your blending with blend modes, but you can take it a step further with those blend if sliders. The same thing here. You can get so far with clipping masks, or layer masks rather, you can take it that much further by use of a clipping mask. So it's something to be aware of, how easy it is to apply and how easy it is to undo, but certainly gives you a lot of more possibilities than you ever had with just basic masking.